Sophie Laurent stood by the window of her art gallery in Paris, sipping a glass of red wine as she watched the busy streets below. The clink of glasses and quiet murmur of conversations in the background made her feel like a spectator in her own life. At 32, she had achieved everything she'd once dreamt of. Her gallery, La Vie en Couleur, had become a renowned place for contemporary art, attracting critics and buyers from across Europe. But success had a hollow ring to it when she thought about the other part of her life, her marriage. 6 years had passed since she married Marcus Hartmann, a German architect with sharp features and a mind always buzzing with ideas. She could remember their wedding day as if it were yesterday. How handsome he looked in his tailored suit, the way his smile had lit up her world. Back then, they had everything, a passionate romance that transcended the physical and delved into their shared dreams of traveling the world, creating art and leaving a mark. Yet, as time passed, things began to change. Marcus had thrown himself into his career. His architectural firm in Berlin had taken off, and though they lived apart, Sophie had hoped their love would remain strong. The distance, however, had done more than just create physical space between them. Their conversations had dwindled from intimate late-night calls to routine check-ins, dominated by discussions of work and logistics. Sophie hadn't seen Marcus in nearly 2 months. His last trip to Paris had been brief, and even then he seemed distracted, more interested in his projects than in her. The gallery, which had once been a source of pride for both of them, now felt like a lonely fortress Sophie had to manage on her own. That night, as she stared out of the window, she couldn't help but wonder if she was becoming invisible to her husband. He had once been captivated by her beauty, by her love for art, and by the way she lived life with so much passion. Now he barely seemed to notice her at all. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the door opening behind her. She turned to see her assistant, Elodie, standing there with a polite smile. "Madame Laurent, the guests are arriving for the exhibition. Shall I show them in?" Elodie asked in her soft French accent. "Yes, of course," Sophie said, placing her wine glass on the table. "Thank you, Elodie." As the guests began to filter into the gallery, Sophie put on her professional mask, greeting each one with a warm smile. She moved through the crowd, discussing the latest pieces on display, but her mind kept drifting back to Marcus. What was he doing right now? Was he thinking of her at all? It was during one of these drifting moments that she noticed a man standing by one of the paintings, his gaze fixed on the canvas, as if he were lost in thought. He was tall, with dark hair and sharp features, dressed in a tailored suit that gave him an air of sophistication. There was something about the way he looked at the painting that intrigued Sophie. She walked over to him, her curiosity piqued. "Do you like it?" she asked, her voice smooth and professional. The man turned to her, his eyes meeting hers with a spark of recognition. "Very much," he said in a low melodic voice. "The use of color is captivating. It feels alive, as if the artist captured a moment of raw emotion." Sophie smiled. "That's exactly what I love about it too. The artist, Isabelle Moreau, has a way of making you feel something with every brushstroke." "I'm Luca Moretti," the man said, extending his hand. "Art critic and enthusiast." Sophie shook his hand, her smile widening. "Sophie Laurent, I own the gallery." "Ah, so you're the one responsible for bringing such remarkable works to Paris. I must say, I'm impressed," Luca said, his eyes lingering on hers for a moment longer than necessary. Sophie felt a flutter in her chest. It wasn't often that someone made her feel seen, truly seen. And Luca was doing just that. They continued to talk, their conversation flowing effortlessly from art to travel to their shared love of culture. Luca was charming, witty, and attentive in a way that Marcus hadn't been in years. He listened to her, asked questions, and seemed genuinely interested in what she had to say. As the night wore on, Sophie found herself laughing more than she had in months. She was captivated by Luca's stories of his travels through Italy, his passion for art, and the way he saw the world. He had a certain vibrancy about him that was infectious, and for the first time in a long time, Sophie felt alive. When the exhibition finally ended and the guests began to leave, Luca lingered. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Sophie," he said, his voice soft and sincere. "I hope we can continue our conversation another time." Sophie hesitated for a moment, her mind racing with thoughts of Marcus. But the allure of Luca's attention was too strong to resist. "I'd like that," she said, her heart pounding in her chest. As Luca left the gallery, Sophie stood by the door, watching him disappear into the night. There was a part of her that knew this was dangerous, that this was the beginning of something she couldn't control. But another part of her, the part that had been starved of affection and passion for so long, was desperate for more. Days turned into weeks, and Sophie found herself thinking about Luca more often than she should. Their casual meetings at art exhibitions and gallery events had become a regular occurrence, and each time they met, the connection between them grew stronger. Luca had a way of making Sophie feel like the most important person in the room. He listened to her in a way that Marcus never did, and he had a passion for life that reignited something within her. She found herself drawn to him, not just because of his charm, but because he made her feel alive in a way that she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't long before their meetings turned into something more. One evening, after a particularly successful exhibition, Luca invited Sophie to join him for dinner at a quiet, candle-lit restaurant on the banks of the Seine. The atmosphere was romantic, and the conversation flowed as easily as the wine. As the night wore on, Sophie found herself opening up to Luca in ways she hadn't with anyone before. She told him about her marriage, about how distant Marcus had become, and about the loneliness she felt in her life. Luca listened, his gaze never leaving hers, and for the first time in years, Sophie felt truly understood. "I don't know how it happened," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But somewhere along the way, Marcus and I lost each other. I don't even know if we can find our way back." Luca reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "You deserve to be happy, Sophie. You deserve to be with someone who sees you, who appreciates you for who you are." Sophie felt a lump form in her throat. But what if it's too late? What if we've drifted too far apart? Luca's grip on her hand tightened. "It's never too late to find happiness, Sophie. Sometimes you have to make a choice to live for yourself." Sophie's heart raced as she looked into Luca's eyes. There was a part of her that knew this was wrong, that she was on the verge of crossing a line she couldn't come back from. But the temptation was too strong, and the pull of Luca's attention was too powerful to resist. Later that night, as they walked along the Seine, Luca leaned in and kissed her. It was a soft, tentative kiss at first, but as Sophie responded, it deepened into something more passionate. In that moment, all of her doubts and fears melted away, replaced by the thrill of being desired again. But as they parted, and Sophie stood alone on the banks of the river, the weight of what had just happened began to sink in. She had crossed a line, one that could never be uncrossed. Let's continue the story, diving deeper into the emotional and psychological ramifications of Sophie's choices, while maintaining the complexity and tension within the plot. Here's the next part of the story. Scene 3. The Web of Lies. The next morning, Sophie woke up with a knot in her stomach. She sat at the edge of her bed, the memory of Luca's kiss still lingering on her lips. Her heart was heavy, weighed down by guilt and confusion. The line she had crossed felt too far gone now, and yet there was an undeniable pull toward Luca, a man who made her feel alive in ways Marcus hadn't in years. She glanced at her phone, hoping for a message from Marcus, but it was empty. Nothing. His silence, once something she could handle, now felt unbearable. It was as if the distance between them had grown wider overnight. Sophie rose from her bed, walking to the window that overlooked the Parisian streets below. The city was vibrant, alive with its usual energy, but Sophie felt hollow inside. She had made a choice, one that now seemed impossible to undo. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Luca. "Good morning, Sophie. I can't stop thinking about last night. When can I see you again?" Sophie's heart fluttered, but the guilt was still there, gnawing at her. She hesitated, her fingers hovering over the screen. Every part of her screamed that this was wrong, but the allure of Luca's attention was too strong to resist. "Soon," she typed back, before setting the phone down and turning to her closet. She needed to clear her mind, to get back to her work at the gallery, where at least she could distract herself from the chaos of her emotions. At the gallery, the usual flow of clients and art enthusiasts didn't bring Sophie the comfort it once had. Elodie, her assistant, noticed her unusual distraction. "Madame Laurent," Elodie said gently, approaching her. "Is everything all right? You seem off today." Sophie forced a smile. "I'm fine, Elodie, just a little tea." Her heart pounding. "I'm fine, Elodie, just a little tired. It's been a long few weeks." Elodie nodded, but there was concern in her eyes. "If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask." Sophie thanked her and returned to her work, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She couldn't shake the memory of Marcus. She had been married to him for 6 years, and yet here she was, exchanging secret messages with another man. It felt surreal, like she was living someone else's life. Later that day, as she stood in the gallery, examining a new shipment of paintings, her phone buzzed again. Another message from Luca. "Dinner tonight. I'll be thinking of you until then." Sophie's breath caught in her throat. This was it. This was the moment where she had to make a decision. To either stop this before it went too far, or to dive in head first. Consequences be damned. Her finger hovered over the screen, her mind racing. She thought about Marcus, about the life they had built together, the promises they had made. But then she thought about Luca, the way he made her feel, the way he looked at her as if she were the only woman in the world. She typed her response before she could stop herself. Yes. That evening, Sophie found herself standing in front of the mirror, adjusting her dress. She had chosen a simple, elegant black dress that hugged her figure, but as she looked at herself, she couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. Was she really doing this? Was she really about to meet Luca again? The thought of Marcus weighed heavily on her mind, but she pushed it aside. This was about her, about what she needed, what she wanted. And right now, she needed to feel alive again. She arrived at the restaurant, her heart pounding in her chest. Luca was already there, waiting for her at a candlelit table near the window. He stood when he saw her, his smile warm and inviting. "Sophie," he said softly, his eyes lighting up as she approached. "You look stunning." Sophie smiled, feeling a rush of warmth at his compliment. "Thank you." They sat down, and as the evening wore on, the conversation flowed effortlessly, just as it had before. Luca was attentive, hanging on her every word, making her feel like the center of the universe. The wine flowed, and with each sip, Sophie felt her inhibitions slipping away. By the time dessert arrived, Sophie found herself leaning closer to Luca, her heart racing with anticipation. She knew where this was headed, and yet she couldn't stop herself. She didn't want to stop herself. After dinner, they walked along the Seine, the lights of Paris reflecting off the water, casting a romantic glow over the city. Luca took her hand, and Sophie felt a shiver run down her spine. This was wrong, she knew that, but it felt so right in the moment. They stopped at a secluded spot along the riverbank, and Luca turned to her, his gaze intense. "I can't stop thinking about you, Sophie," he whispered, his voice low and husky. "I haven't felt this way in a long time." Sophie's breath caught in her throat. She knew she should walk away, but the pull of his words, the intensity of his gaze, was too much. And then he kissed her. It was a soft kiss at first, tentative and unsure, but as Sophie responded, it deepened into something more passionate, more urgent. In that moment, all of her guilt, all of her doubts melted away. There was only Luca and the way he made her feel. They parted, breathless, and Sophie stared at him, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. I should go, she whispered, her voice shaky. Luca nodded, but there was a look of longing in his eyes. I understand, but I don't want this to end, Sophie. I don't want us to end. Sophie bit her lip, torn between what she knew was right and what she wanted. I don't know if I can do this, Luca. He took her hand, his grip firm but gentle. You deserve to be happy, Sophie. And I want to be the one to make you happy. Sophie stared at him, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it. This was the moment where everything would change. Scene 4. The Price of Betrayal. Days turned into weeks, and Sophie found herself living a double life. By day, she was the successful gallery owner, the loving wife of Marcus Hartman. But by night, she was Luca Moretti's lover. Their affair was intoxicating, thrilling, and dangerous all at once. Every stolen kiss, every secret meeting, was a reminder of the life Sophie had chosen, one filled with passion, but also with lies. Marcus remained oblivious, consumed by his work. He called occasionally, but their conversations were brief, filled with polite exchanges and talk of his latest projects. Sophie could hear the distance in his voice, but instead of confronting it, she buried herself deeper into her affair with Luca. Luca, for his part, was everything Marcus wasn't. He was attentive, passionate, and fully present in their relationship. With him, Sophie felt alive, desired, and important. But as their affair continued, the guilt began to gnaw at her, growing stronger with each passing day. One evening, after a particularly heated argument with Marcus over the phone, Sophie found herself sitting alone in her apartment, staring at her reflection in the mirror. What had she become? A liar, a cheater. The very thought made her stomach turn. But it wasn't just the guilt that weighed on her. It was the realization that she had fallen out of love with Marcus long before Luca had come into her life. Their marriage had been crumbling for years, held together by memories of a love that no longer existed. And now, it was all falling apart. The weight of Sophie's secret had become unbearable. Every day was a battle between her guilt and her longing for Luca. But even the excitement of their affair had started to sour. What was once thrilling now felt suffocating, like a web of lies tightening around her. One afternoon, as Sophie sat in her gallery office, her phone buzzed. It was Marcus. A rare surprise. He almost never called during the day anymore. She hesitated for a moment, her finger hovering over the screen, before finally answering. "Hey," she said softly. "Sophie." Marcus's voice was sharp and tense, unlike the usual cold distance she had grown accustomed to. "I'm in Paris. Can we talk?" Her heart skipped a beat. Marcus hadn't visited Paris in months, and now, out of the blue, he was here. "Of course," Sophie replied, trying to sound casual. "When?" "Tonight, our apartment. I'll be there by 8. Sophie hung up, her mind racing. Marcus didn't just show up unexpectedly, especially not with this urgency in his voice. Something was wrong, and she could feel it deep in her bones. The afternoon passed in a blur, the usual gallery visitors and tasks feeling insignificant compared to the dread looming over her. By the time 8 o'clock rolled around, Sophie was pacing the apartment, her nerves frayed. She had cleaned the place obsessively, as if scrubbing away the evidence of her betrayal would somehow erase the guilt that plagued her. But nothing could prepare her for the moment when Marcus walked through the door. He looked exhausted, his tall frame slumped with the weight of something unspoken. His sharp blue eyes, once so full of warmth, were now clouded with something darker. Sophie opened her mouth to greet him, but the words stuck in her throat. Marcus didn't waste any time. "Sophie, I know." Her stomach dropped. She could barely breathe. "No, what?" Marcus let out a bitter laugh, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "About Luca. About your affair." Sophie felt as if the ground had been ripped out from under her. Her legs buckled, and she collapsed onto the nearest chair, her head spinning. She began. But the words wouldn't come. What could she say? There was no defense, no excuse. "How long has this been going on?" Marcus's voice was eerily calm, but there was an edge to it, a simmering anger that frightened her. Sophie's mind raced. She could lie, try to downplay the situation, but it was too late for that. Marcus knew. He had known for who knows how long. 2 months, Sophie whispered, her voice barely audible. It's been 2 months. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath as if trying to steady himself. When he opened them again, his gaze was piercing. Why, Sophie? Why would you do this? Tears welled in Sophie's eyes, blurring her vision. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times. The confrontation she had known was inevitable. But now that it was here, she didn't know how to explain the storm of emotions swirling inside her. I don't know, she choked out. I was lonely, Marcus. You were never here. It felt like you stopped caring about me, about us. She wiped at her eyes, her voice breaking. I just wanted to feel something again. Marcus let out a harsh sigh, running a hand over his face. So this is my fault? You're blaming me for your affair? No, Sophie exclaimed, shaking her head. I'm not blaming you. I know I made a terrible mistake. But Marcus, we haven't been happy for a long time. You know that. Marcus's expression hardened. We could have worked on it, Sophie. We could have talked, gone to counseling. Anything but this. His voice cracked, and for the first time Sophie saw the pain behind his anger. You didn't even give me a chance. Sophie sobbed quietly, her guilt overwhelming. He was right. She hadn't given him a chance. She had taken the easy way out, falling into Luca's arms instead of facing the cracks in her marriage. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice trembling. I'm so sorry. Marcus stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet but firm. I loved you, Sophie. I still do. But I don't think I can forgive this. Sophie felt her heart shatter. She had known this was coming. But hearing the words still cut deeper than she could have imagined. I understand, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I'll move out. I'll leave Paris if you want. Marcus shook his head. You don't have to leave Paris. But this is the end of us. The finality in his words crushed her, and for a moment, she thought she might collapse under the weight of it all. But deep down, she knew he was right. Their marriage had been crumbling long before Luca entered the picture. The affair had just been the breaking point. Marcus stood up, his expression resolute. I'll stay at a hotel tonight. We can talk about the details later. He grabbed his coat and headed for the door. But just before leaving, he turned to look at her one last time. Goodbye, Sophie. And with that, he was gone. Sophie sat there, numb, staring at the door. The silence of the apartment was deafening, and for the first time, she felt the full weight of her actions. She had destroyed her marriage, not just with her affair, but with her refusal to face the problems they had been avoiding for years. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Luca. Thinking of you, can't wait to see you again. Sophie stared at the screen for a long time before deleting the message. Luca was no longer part of her world. He had been an escape, a distraction from the reality of her failing marriage. But now there was nothing left to distract her from. She sat in the dark, the weight of her choices crashing down on her like a wave. The secrets, the lies, the affair, they had all destroyed the one thing she had once held dear. Months passed, and Sophie began to rebuild her life. The divorce was painful, but it also gave her a sense of closure. She and Marcus had both agreed that their marriage had been over long before the affair. They were simply two people who had grown apart, clinging to a relationship that had already unraveled. Sophie continued running her gallery, pouring herself into her work as a way to heal. She had ended things with Luca shortly after the confrontation with Marcus. It hadn't been easy, but she knew it was the right decision. Luca had been a temporary escape, a bandage over a deeper wound. But now, Sophie was ready to face her life without distractions. She spent more time with friends, reconnected with her family, and slowly began to rediscover who she was outside of her failed marriage. It wasn't easy. There were days when the guilt and loneliness overwhelmed her. But there were also moments of clarity, moments when she realized that her mistakes didn't define her. One evening, as Sophie walked along the Seine, she stopped at the same spot where she had kissed Luca months before. The memory of that night no longer held the same allure. Instead, it served as a reminder of the choices she had made and the consequences she had faced. She took a deep breath, letting the cool breeze wash over her. She was learning to forgive herself, learning to move on. Her life wasn't perfect, but it was hers. And for the first time in a long time, she felt at peace. Thank you for watching this story of love, loss, and redemption. We hope it resonated with you. If you have any questions about Sophie's journey or your own thoughts about relationships and forgiveness, we'd love to hear them in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more engaging stories like this one.
I, 28 male, am still trying to understand the events of the last month. My ex-girlfriend, Julie, 29, thinks that my current girlfriend, Mindy, 28, is manipulative and sabotaged our 4-year relationship. I was in a loving relationship with Julie for the last 4 years. We met through some mutual friends. Julie and I were very compatible in terms of our love for outdoor activities and running. We have very similar lifestyles and supported each other well for the last 4 years. We've also been living together for the last 3 years. We even discussed getting married during the summer. Everything was great, and I planned to propose to her over the holidays. However, I started to see changes in Julie's behavior around September. She was acting distant and looking stressed. It was quite noticeable, and I was worried. I trust her wholeheartedly, and I could not imagine she would be cheating on me. However, she did spend more time by herself. Around the same time, Julie's friend Mindy messaged me privately and asked me if I could meet her secretly, as she wanted to tell me something about Julie. Mindy and Julie work together, and I've known Mindy ever since I started dating Julie. I was surprised, to be honest. I assumed the worst. I met her at a cafe after work. She asked me if things were going okay between Julie and me. She told me that Julie had said to her that she was planning to leave me soon. This was a total shock to me. I asked her if there was anyone else that Julie was interested in, and she said no. Julie confided in her that she wasn't sure about marrying me. She told me that she had to tell me this, as she didn't want me to be blindsided. I was devastated. I started putting more effort into making our relationship more exciting, planning more dates, etc. Mindy was also helping me through this time and telling me more about what Julie told her. Eventually, before Thanksgiving, Julie said to me that she loved me, but she wanted to take a break for a month to live alone. She said that she just wanted to live alone for a month to make sure she wanted to marry me. I was completely heartbroken. I asked her if she wanted to pursue someone else. She told me that that was not the case, and I better not do anything stupid either. She loves me with all her heart, but she just wants to stay away from me to ensure she's marrying me for love, not because she's used to being with me. I did not understand that at all. I told her that if she's not sure after 4 years if she wants to marry me, then maybe we should just break up. We had a big fight and broke up after a few days. As our lease was ending, we decided to part ways in December. She got a new apartment, and I kept our old apartment and just took her name off the lease. After the breakup, I felt very lonely, as I wasn't used to being in the apartment alone. I didn't want to keep being sad, and invited many friends for a New Year's party. I also invited Mindy. We had a good time, and my friends did their best to cheer me up. Mindy also mingled with my friends, and it was good. Mindy decided to stay back to help me clean up, and we hooked up that night. I felt guilty, but Mindy did cheer me up. Since then, we've hung out almost daily at my place. I'm still sad about Julie, but I won't lie. Being with Mindy makes me happy. She's sweet and caring. Last Sunday, we woke up, and someone was banging on the door. I went to open it, and it was Julie. She looked furious and started yelling at me. She kept on accusing me of cheating on her. I told her I most certainly did not cheat on her, and she was the one who broke up with me. Mindy was also at my apartment. Julie was just angry at both of us. She started calling Mindy a manipulative witch and told me that Mindy was the one who suggested to her that she should take some time away from me to understand her true feelings. I calmed her down and asked her to explain herself. She told me that since our marriage conversation, she told Mindy about it, and Mindy kept on asking Julie if she was sure about marrying me. Mindy suggested that she take some time to understand her true feelings and that I'll understand and give her some space. When I said no, Mindy convinced her that I was so controlling that I couldn't even give her 1 month to herself and convinced her to break up with me. Mindy told me she did not say such things. These were all Julie's ideas, and she was just there during these conversations. She did tell Julie that she told me about some of the things so that I could get a chance to make things right with her over the last few months. That made Julie more angry, and she started accusing me of emotionally cheating on her. Julie told me that the last few weeks have made her realize that we were meant to be together, but she now cannot believe that I could move on from a 4-year relationship in a week. On one hand, I want to believe Julie, but she broke up with me for no fault of my own. Mindy was there for me when I was down, but now I also doubt her. She suddenly started talking to me out of the blue, as we had never really been close before, and she immediately became my support after the breakup, although Julie was her close friend. Am I the idiot to emotionally cheat on Julie? Should I have told her about Mindy's text? Should I not have moved on from her so quickly, even though Julie broke up with me? I was just hurting, and Mindy was right there to support me. I need advice from someone with a clear mind on what's going on. Mindy played you both. It's kind of obvious from what you wrote. Man, talk to Julie. If you guys have been dating for 4 years, to the point where you were about to propose to her, you likely know her well enough to tell if she's probably lying or not. Hear her out and go with your gut. Even if you choose not to reconcile or believe her, I'd still take a break from dating Mindy. You rebounded hard. 1 week after a 4-year relationship ends, you're already sleeping with someone else? Take your time to mourn the relationship and center yourself. No need to rush into anything. I hope you were using protection. Otherwise, I expect Mindy will soon notify you of her pregnancy. Yep, the dude messed up. This level of obliviousness from OP is kinda shocking. I find it upsetting that he doesn't trust Julie's word over Mindy. He claims to have loved and trusted Julie, yet Mindy was supposedly Julie's friend, and crap-talked her and jumped in bed with him at the first opportunity. Friends don't do that. I bet Julie wouldn't treat a friend that way. And I bet when in several years, Mindy goes full out Gone Girl on him, he'll be all surprised Pikachu face. But there were no red flags at all. Mindy knew exactly what she was doing when she volunteered to stay behind after the New Year's Eve party to help OP clean. Mindy played Julie. OP played himself. Mindy is the catalytic idiot. OP is definitely the one who kept the fire burning idiot, while Julie fell for the manipulation of what was supposed to be her best friend and her entire relationship. Wow, poor girl. Imagine the destruction Mindy might cause with some other person who she doesn't want in OP's life. I once knew someone like that. Luckily, everyone started to see her true personality, and it was twisted. Good riddance to her. I feel like Julie dodged a bullet. Now she's not marrying a man who sneaks around with other women behind her back and sleeps with her friends. I've been dating Matt, 26, for a little over a year. We knew each other 2 years prior to dating, and we got along really well. I have a son, toddler, and a daughter, preschooler, who we met multiple times when I was with the friend group. Here's the thing, though. We just got a place together, but the place needed work before we could move in. So we agreed with the landlord that we would help fix it up with him, the landlord, to get half off the first month's rent. He agreed. So for a month, we were there every day cleaning this place up. And I started noticing some red flags like a quick temper. but I literally just assumed it was because the AC wasn't working and it was like a sauna in the house. So he was pouring sweat and getting angry. But again, I thought it was because he was hot. But as soon as he cooled off, he was fine again. But like we finished the house, the AC was working again, so it was no longer hot. We moved in yesterday morning. He was barking orders all day to me, like telling me where to put things, or if I put something somewhere he didn't like, he was all, "Why would you put that there?" and literally looked at me like I was stupid with the "Are you serious?" look. But I let it slide because I really didn't know what else to do, I guess. Or like every 15 minutes, he asked me to go with him to Walmart because he just wanted to blow a bunch of money on stuff to make the place feel like home. We hadn't even unpacked half of our stuff either. He got irritated when I said I didn't think we should spend more money right now. But anyway, I go and pick up my kids and stuff for dinner. I grab a family pack of kielbasa, the one that has 3.5 strips and rice. Well, I only cut up 2 of the kielbasa because that's literally plenty. He comes over and says, "Why aren't you making all of it?" So I told him I didn't need to make all of it and that this would feed us all and would still be enough for leftovers. Then I commented about how I would use the rest of the kielbasa that I wasn't cooking to feed my kids and myself the next day because I like kielbasa sandwiches. He blew up. Thankfully, the kids weren't inside to hear it. My mom came over and brought them to the park across the street. He told me there was no way it would feed all of us and that I was selfish for only thinking about what I would eat tomorrow instead of worrying about feeding us all tonight. He walked out and slammed the door after I said, "Are you really blowing up on me about food right now?" I watched him drive off. I immediately started taking my kids and my kids' stuff out to the car and had my mom leave with my kids. I get everything loaded up before he returns. Most of my stuff is still in storage. Well, he texted me about 25 minutes after I left, saying, "Did you really leave? Please come back and talk to me. I'm sorry. I'm having such a bad day, and I'm just exhausted from working and doing the repairs here. You shouldn't have left over this," etc., etc. So, am I the idiot for leaving the same day I moved in with my boyfriend? Edit. I generally don't have the energy to argue with salty, toxic masculinity men. I work full-time. I'm not leeching Matt's money. I bought the food with my money. Half of my money went into getting us in the house. I work full-time at a bank. He had work the next day, but I didn't. Therefore, he wouldn't have been home to eat the leftover kielbasa with me and my kids. And therefore, no, I didn't include him in it. Not the idiot. Leaving was the right decision. He thought he had you in a position where you wouldn't leave. Started being a total moron once you agreed to live together and started working on the apartment. It would have only gotten worse over time. You did what's best for you and your kids. It was the audacity to say, "You shouldn't leave over this," when he literally left over it. Rules for 3, not for me. That dude's a red flag, and you did the right thing. I'm so glad you moved you and your children out. Please don't go back to him, ever, no matter what he says. You got a dose of reality and made the very best decision for you and your kids. Well done, OP. Please tell me you took the kielbasa with you. After CPS got involved, my husband and I, both 33 and male, recently became guardians of my niece, Ella, teen. There's a lot of background here that I need to get out of the way first. Ella's father's my brother, Tom, and Ella's mom died due to complications, delivering my other niece, Becca, pre-tween. Ella was 7 at the time, and she blamed Becca for their mom's death. She quickly became furious and expressed hatred for her sister and made comments about how Becca should have been the one to die instead and that Becca stole her mom from her. Tom did not get Ella any help. I got involved and warned him. Ella was not coping well, and things would turn nasty. Tom said he was helping the girls' relationship, and that's all that would be needed. Then 2 years later, with no therapy and no improvement in the relationship between the girls, Tom married Sarah. This is where things went from bad to worse. Becca adored Sarah and started calling her mom almost immediately. This only angered Ella more. She would get so angry at her dad, at her sister, at her stepmom, and she would tell Becca, She deserved to die, and how dare she replace the woman who died because of her? She told Tom that he was sick for doing that to her mom. She told Sarah she was stealing from her mom, and she hated her and her ugly face, and that she would never be good enough. These things happened out in the open and were witnessed by our extended family, but they also went on at home. Sarah did her best to try and get Ella help, but Tom was not on board, and Sarah wasn't the right person to do it. CPS became involved after Ella called them on Sarah and wanted to get Becca and Sarah separated at all cost. She wanted to punish her sister for calling Sarah mom and wanted to punish Becca too. It became clear after CPS got involved that while Sarah was not a danger to Becca, Ella and Becca could not continue to live together in the environment they were in. They only took things so seriously because Ella told the social worker after wishing Becca and Sarah dead and telling them how much she hates her sister. My husband and I stepped up and offered to take Ella, which CPS agreed to. When I spoke to them about the rules and how everything would be handled, they said not to set up visits with Tom or Becca for Ella and to get Ella therapy. But they said we could attend larger family functions even if they would be there if we wanted to. But it likely would be better not to. I already knew this. My husband and I discussed it and agreed we should all stay away while Ella's with us and still struggling as much as she is. I told my family what we had decided, and they didn't understand why we couldn't have quick visits or try to expose the girls to each other in short bursts. I said it felt like it would be bad for both of them, but mostly for Ella, who I had to prioritize as she needed so much help. My family then claimed my big announcement was like a screw you to them. Tom was enraged. Am I the idiot? Not the idiot. Tom has failed to help her, so it's great she has you to step up. She's not ready to be around Becca and Sarah. She needs therapy, love, and time. And you're protecting Becca. She doesn't need to be around someone who hates her that much. Poor Becca's been abused her entire life by Ella. She's going to need help. It feels like no one in your family has taken seriously Ella's behavior in the past 8 years. 8 years of believing it's nothing, just a phase, a tiny adjustment, and more minimizing magical thinking. Honestly, I don't care that the rest of your family doesn't understand. Do what is best for Ella. This is what CPS expects of you, and this is what Ella finally deserves. The rest of your family's in denial about Ella's extreme dysfunction if they support Tom's position. My family has a tradition dating back 6 generations in which the firstborn son is named William. My father and I use our middle names to avoid confusion, while my grandfather is Bill. It's not that I don't like tradition, it's just that my middle name, James, is the name I've always been known as, and I always hated being made fun of when I was younger, especially at school, when a new teacher would inevitably call out my actual first name when taking the register, and all the other kids would laugh at me for trying to explain that I didn't want to be called that. Now I'm an adult. I know that if I wanted to, I could legally change my name by deed poll, but I guess I've just gotten used to the inconvenience, and at this stage of my life, it's more of a conversation starter if anything else. I also understand that of all the things to be made fun of when younger, it's pretty low down on the list, and some people would just say I'm being petty. Anyway, I've recently become a father to a beautiful baby boy, and to my family's horror, we've named him Ezra, which both my partner and I love. We've still given him the middle name William, but this is not good enough for my family, who've practically not acknowledged my son's name at all. He's a few months old now, and whenever they interact with him, he's referred to as Junior, or the child. All I want for Ezra is for him to feel like he's his own person when he grows up, not to feel like there's some kind of burden on him to live up to any expectations we might have for him, like I suppose I've always felt somewhat, and to feel comfortable knowing that any decision he makes, his mom and I will always support him. This is what makes me stand by our decision, but I can't help but feel guilt for breaking the tradition and that there's now a slight rift between me and my family, especially my dad. Am I the idiot for not naming my son William? Not the idiot. You and your partner can name your child whatever you like. You didn't start this tradition and had no say in it, so your family has no say in whether you like it going or not. I love that you kept the tradition by giving William as a middle name. That should be plenty enough. But don't feel like the idiot for naming your child. Not to mention that the mother should get a say too. What if she had her own family traditions? Why is it OP's family that supposedly gets a say? I'm not a fan of naming kids after other people in general, but seriously, one in every generation? Does it include cousins too? How confusing it must be to have so many Williams. He's referred to as Junior, or the child. I suggest you do the same with them. Always refer to them as the senior, or the mother, etc. See how long it takes them to catch on. Tradition's just peer pressure from dead people. It's not up to anyone else but you and your partner. Your family's refusing to call Ezra by his name is extremely disrespectful and immature. Obviously, not the idiot, but I will laugh if your son grows up and decides to go by William.
Hello, I'm Grace, and I'd like to tell you about my challenging marriage. It all started 5 years ago. When I met Thomas, it set the stage for a journey I never anticipated. I was excelling in my career as a senior marketing manager at a prestigious tech company, a job that brought immense satisfaction and a handsome salary. I was the breadwinner of our household for a while, as Thomas faced intermittent unemployment. Thomas was pursuing his dream of becoming a writer, and I was his biggest cheerleader. He had a charm that could make anyone smile, and writing was his passion. I believed he would make it big someday. Despite my own demanding career, I made sure to support his dream all the way. We often stayed up late, discussing the life we were going to build together. Thomas sometimes took odd jobs to help out, but I always told him not to worry. I was happy to support us while he figured things out. We had unshakable faith in each other's dreams and were ready to ride the ups and downs together. Now, let me tell you about Mary, my sister-in-law who lived in the captivating city of Auckland, New Zealand. While we weren't extremely close, I considered her part of our extended family. Thomas had always been fond of his little sister despite their age gap. She was only 23. Thomas often shared stories of their childhood, showing how deeply he cared for her. Though Mary and I hadn't formed a particularly tight bond, I cherished the moments we shared during family gatherings. She had a youthful zest for life. Mary's decision to study abroad was a bold one, and everyone supported it. One evening, after a grueling day at the office, I came home with aching feet, ready to relax. But Thomas, with his cheeky smile, had other plans. "Grace, there's something I need to discuss with you," he said. "Of course, Thomas. What's on your mind?" "It's about Mary. Her health has taken a serious hit, and the medical expenses in Auckland are astronomical. She reached out to me for help. Can we send her some money?" "Absolutely, Thomas. What happened to her?" "She's been dealing with some stomach issues, and the doctors are running tests to figure out what's wrong." "Oh no, poor Mary. We'll definitely help her." "Thanks, babe. I hate to burden you with this, but she's my sister, and I can't stand the thought of her suffering. You know I've been between jobs for a while now, and my savings are running low. Mary just graduated and is actively looking for a job, but it's not easy for her in her field. Family comes first, Thomas, and we'll make sure she gets the help she needs." "How much does she need?" "Just $5,000. I know it's a lot. We'll tighten our belts if we have to. It's the least we can do." "You're amazing, Grace. I promise I'll pay you back as soon as I find a stable job. I hate that it's come to this, but I'm so grateful for your support. Don't worry about paying me back, Thomas. Family sticks together no matter what." Without a second thought, I agreed to send the money. It was a decision made out of love, compassion, and a belief that family always comes first. I saw the genuine concern in Thomas's eyes for his sister's well-being and couldn't bear to see him burdened by worry. After all, what good was the money? I earned it. If I couldn't use it to help the people I cared about the most, then what was the point? I have always believed that wealth holds no real value unless it's used to make a positive impact on the lives of those you love. It wasn't about the amount or the inconvenience, it was about standing by Thomas's side and showing solidarity with his family. So, I transferred the money to Mary. Little did I know that this simple act of generosity would trigger a series of events that would turn my life upside down. A few weeks later, Thomas informed me that his mom, Charlotte, was making a spontaneous trip to Oakland to be with Mary. He explained that Charlotte was deeply concerned about her daughter's health and that he needed to drive her to the airport. As soon as I heard this, I knew I wanted to accompany them. I wanted to meet Charlotte before her flight, offering her some support and comfort during this stressful time. Even though Thomas said I didn't need to, I insisted. So, Thomas, how's Mary doing? What's her exact diagnosis? Well, it's a bit complicated, Grace. She's been having these stomach issues, and the doctors are still trying to figure it out. Yes, dear, Thomas chimed in. They haven't pinpointed the exact cause yet. It's been quite a struggle for her. Stomach issues. That sounds vague. But she's been going to the doctor regularly, right? Oh yes, she's seen a few specialists, but they haven't concluded anything yet. It's been frustrating. Darling, we are hopeful she will get better soon. I'm going there to take better care of her. That's all a mother can do, you know. I hope so too. It's just strange that it's been a while and they haven't reached a diagnosis yet. For someone as young as her to have such issues. Let it go, Grace. Let's just focus on getting Mom to the airport right now. While Charlotte was away in Oakland, life continued as usual. I headed to work while Thomas stayed home, working on his novel. Another month passed, and then Thomas approached me with another request for money. He explained that Mary was relocating for a new job and needed financial help for her new apartment. Charlotte was still in Oakland with her, and from what I knew, Charlotte was wealthy enough to support Mary comfortably. Despite my doubts, I couldn't bring myself to question Thomas's family. I quietly sent Mary the requested $33,000, hoping this time it would truly benefit her. But then, a week later, Thomas dropped a bombshell that left me utterly flabbergasted. Grace, I need to ask you for something. Something big. What is it, Thomas? I need you to send my sister $50,000. $50,000. Thomas, that's half of my annual salary. Why on earth would Mary need that much money? Mary's health is deteriorating rapidly. It's a serious stomach condition, and the doctor recommends surgery. She's in pain, and we can't wait any longer. I get that, Thomas, but why can't you just tell me exactly what's wrong with her? It's so frustrating not knowing. You're always so vague about it. And why couldn't Charlotte help with the $3,000 last time? First, it was for a diagnosis, then an apartment, and now a surgery. Charlotte has her own expenses, Grace. She's been helping Mary too, but this situation is just beyond what any of us expected. I understand, but it's just so hard to keep giving money without knowing where it's going. It's complicated, Grace. I wish I could explain it better, but it's a medical thing, and Mary's privacy matters too. I'm not asking for every detail, just something more than some stomach issue, Thomas. Grace, please, this is about her life. I can't believe you're questioning this. I'm not questioning Mary's health. I just want some proof. You think I would lie about my own sister's health? I cannot believe you're being so heartless about this. I am not being heartless, Thomas. I am scared. I need to protect our future too. I can't drain our savings without knowing more. You know what, Grace? If you can't trust me on this, maybe we don't have a future together. I wouldn't want a divorce if you don't help me. Are you seriously threatening me with divorce over this? I thought you would support me when my family needs it the most. I want to support your family, but I also need to know I'm not being taken advantage of. If you won't share the truth, I can't keep sending money blindly. You're unbelievable, Grace. Fine, do what you want. But remember, you are making this choice. Don't go around telling everyone that I left you when it's completely your fault. I plopped down on the couch, feeling the weight of Thomas's request pressing on me. Thoughts swirled in my head like a blender on high speed. Why all the secrecy? First, it was for Mary's diagnosis, then an apartment, and now surgery. It just didn't add up. I sat there, wrestling with my thoughts. On one hand, there was my undying love for Thomas. I didn't want to see him hurt or upset, and family always came first for me. But on the other hand, something just didn't feel right. I needed some proof, some clarity, but all I got were vague explanations. In the end, my love for Thomas and my sense of family loyalty won out. I made the payment to Mary. She texted me a thank you note. As the sun rose the next morning, I broke the news to Thomas. I'm sorry for doubting you, Thomas. I transferred the money to Mary. You did, Grace. You are the best. I'm sorry for last night. The divorce thing just came out of my mouth. I didn't really mean it. No matter how hard I tried to play along, something just didn't sit right. Even after sending Mary the money, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story than met the eye. Thomas had threatened me with divorce the previous night, but once I sent the money, he transformed back into Mr. Charming. I couldn't ignore it. Why all the secrecy about Mary's health? Why wasn't Charlotte stepping up to help her own daughter when she was struggling? It was a blast. Jenny wore this stunning red dress that would make anyone jealous. You know, the usual stuff, food, gossip, and a lot of dancing. Typical Jenny, making an entrance. Why weren't you there, by the way? Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. Thomas and I had a fight. No way, Grace. What's going on? Well, you know my sister-in-law Mary in New Zealand, right? She's been asking for money, claiming it's for her health issues. Yeah, I remember seeing her at your wedding. She was just a kid then. What's her deal? Something feels off. I sent her some money before, but now she's asking me to send a huge chunk of my salary, and he threatened to divorce me if I didn't. That does not sound right. That was a shitty move on Thomas's part. Did you try talking to Mary directly? I did. I left her a few texts, but she was so vague about it. She just thanked me for the money and stuff. I don't know much about her anyway. You know, sometimes people spill more on social media than they intend to. Have you checked Mary's profiles? What's she up to? Mary isn't exactly on Facebook or Instagram. She's always been quite private. That is strange for a 23-year-old not to have any social media presence. Let me put my stalking skills to use. I took a quick break to grab the blueberry muffins and coffee we ordered from the counter, hoping to ease the tension. When I returned, Amon's face looked like she had seen a ghost. I leaned in and couldn't help but ask, "What's got you looking so shocked? Isn't this Mary? There she is on Instagram. Strange how I couldn't find her at first." Well, maybe she blocked you. Why would she do that? Take a look at her account. You're not going to like what you see. I started scrolling through Mary's Instagram, and, Manny, you will not believe this, Mary was at a Dua Lipa concert just a week ago. What on earth is going on? Not to mention how expensive those front row tickets would be. My heart sank as I scrolled through Mary's Instagram profile. There she was, living a life that seemed far from the struggles Thomas had described: fancy restaurants, designer bags and clothes, trips to Europe, and photos with internet personalities. Nothing about her life appeared to match the dire situation Thomas had painted. The final blow came when Amoni opened her Instagram story, showing Mary having a luxurious lunch with Charlotte at an upscale restaurant just 4 hours ago. Her follower count stood at around 20,000, a number that made her a budding Instagram influencer. How could someone with such a substantial online presence, who seemed to enjoy a life of luxury, be in financial straits as Thomas had claimed? Girl, she's flaunting a Gucci bag, and your husband claims she's broke. You'll definitely need to have a serious talk with Thomas, Amoni remarked. You're right, Amoni. I need to go. See you later. I dashed back home, my head swirling with thoughts, but Thomas was nowhere in sight. I couldn't sit still, so I restlessly paced the living room, my heart racing. Finally, Thomas walked through the door. Hey, baby, how was your day with Amoni? I asked. You're home early. It was very educational. I learned about a lot of things today. That's different. I just went for a walk to hit my daily step goal. Nice. You seem upset. Is everything all right with Amoni? Oh, come on, Thomas. Did you know about this or not? Know about what? I pulled out the screenshots of Mary's photos that Amoni had sent me. Thomas's face turned pale as he gazed at the screenshots. I could see the regret in his eyes. Where did you find these? It doesn't matter where I found them. The question is, did you know? Look me in the eyes and admit you've been keeping things from me. Thomas nodded reluctantly. Yes, I have. Why in the world would you lie about something like this? And where did all the money I worked hard for go? It's a complicated situation. I'm not accepting that as an answer. You better start talking. Mary needed money because she didn't finish college. She dropped out. What? And who was going to tell me that? You said she graduated. Yeah, I never told you. I lied. She wanted to become an influencer and needed money to maintain that lifestyle. I thought I could help her out. So you sent her money so she could splurge on designer clothes and bags and build a fake social media life. You don't understand, Grace. She realized college wasn't for her, so there was no illness, no surgery, no new job, and no new apartment. You lied to me, took the money I worked hard for, and threw it at your sister who just wanted to live a glamorous social media fantasy. What about Charlotte? Why did she fly out to Oakland? She's no saint. They come from a family of liars. They are actually planning to fly to Paris for an influencer event on Mother's Day. It's a thing where everyone brings their mother as their date. I can't believe you tried to sell me the story that your sister was seriously ill when in reality you needed money for these first-world problems. Please forgive me, Grace. And then you threatened to leave me, huh? Aaron, you are such a manipulator. I'm sorry. I seriously did not mean it, babe. Please, can I do anything to make it up to you? You want to make it up to me? Okay, let's divorce. You can't be serious. Yes, you threatened me with divorce, but you know what? Now I genuinely desire a divorce. Life got really messy at home. Thomas and I were living in different corners of our own house. I needed a break from more than lies, so I booked a flight to my parents' place. My flight was in 2 days, but just when I thought things could not get crazier, Mary herself rang me up one morning as I was having my coffee. I stared at my phone, wondering what on earth she wanted. Finally, I answered, Grace, you must listen carefully. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into. Mary, what are you talking about? If you think about divorcing Thomas, it won't end well for you. You'll regret it. I can't keep sending you money for your so-called needs. You don't understand the situation, Grace. I have plans, and they involve you staying married to Thomas. The moment she started talking, I had this brilliant idea. I activated the recording feature on my phone, making sure to capture every word she said. You have no choice, Grace. Be a supportive sister-in-law or face the consequences. Threats won't change my mind. You think you can just walk away, Grace? You have no idea who you're dealing with. If you dare to divorce my brother, I'll make sure your life becomes a living hell. I have ways and connections you can't even imagine. Well, Mary, it seems like you have your bag of threats, but I have something too. You see, I've been recording this entire conversation. You can't be serious. Oh, but I am. And now I'm giving you 1 month to return every cent you took from me. Otherwise, say goodbye to that online empire you were trying to build. I'll leak this recording to make sure each one of your followers hears the truth. Grace, please don't do something drastic. Okay. Just give me some time, and I'll pay you back. I promise. 1 month, Mary. Don't test my patience again. In the end, I did get the money back from Mary. She wired it to my account a day before the 1-month deadline expired. Thomas and I, well, we couldn't fix what was broken. So, I went ahead and filed for divorce, which, let me tell you, was not a walk in the park. But hey, sometimes you have to do what is right for you. Being single again has its perks. Work is more exciting, socializing is a blast, and I'm living life on my own terms. I bought myself a new apartment, a place I can call my own. My family and friends often ask me how I manage to keep my spirits high through all that craziness. I just give them a huge smile and say, when people cross lines with you, sometimes you have to cross some lines too. Don't play the victim. Take control of your life and your happiness.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
I've often wondered what it might feel like to be seen, truly seen, by the people who were supposed to know me best. My parents, Melissa and Bob, always seemed to have their eyes trained on my younger brother, Timothy. He was the golden child, the intellectual prodigy who excelled at everything deemed important in our household. Recitals, drama performances, debate competitions. Timothy shone in all of them, and my parents were always front and center, applauding like their lives depended on it. And then there was me, Elliot Brown, the athlete, the fighter. My world revolved around judo mats and boxing rings, sweat and grit. I lived for the rush of a match, the moment when it was just me and my opponent, no room for distractions or doubts. But no matter how many trophies I brought home, how many medals I hung on the wall, my parents never seemed to notice. Not once did they come to watch me compete. Not for the district championships, not for state finals, not even when I made nationals. While Timothy's stage performances were adorned with flowers and standing ovations, my victories were celebrated in the echoing silence of an empty auditorium, or worse, in my own mind. The only constant in my corner was Coach Joe. He wasn't just my coach. He was the father I wished I had. Joe believed in me when no one else did. He'd sit me down after every match, win or lose, and tell me what I'd done right, what I could improve on. He'd remind me that strength wasn't just about physical power. It was about resilience, about standing tall even when the world seemed determined to push you down. I'll never forget the time I qualified for the regional finals in judo. It was one of the proudest moments of my life. But when I told my parents, their response was a dismissive, "That's nice, dear. When's Timothy's next recital again?" It was like a slap in the face. I stopped telling them about my matches after that. What was the point? At home, Timothy basked in their attention, his achievements displayed like sacred artifacts. My accolades, on the other hand, were crammed into a corner of my room, collecting dust. I didn't resent Timothy. How could I? It wasn't his fault that our parents saw him as the epitome of success. But there were moments, late at night, when the unfairness of it all hit me like a sucker punch to the gut. I often wonder if my parents even know who I am. Do they know how many hours I've spent training, how many punches I've thrown, how many times I've picked myself up off the mat after being knocked down? Do they care? Or am I just the other son? The one who never quite fit into their picture of a perfect family? I've learned to stop seeking their approval. Instead, I channel all my energy into my sport, into proving to myself that I'm enough. Joe taught me that validation doesn't have to come from others, it can come from within. And so, I fight. Not for them, not for the applause or the recognition, but for me. Because in the ring, I'm not just Elliot, the overlooked son. I'm Elliot Brown, the fighter, the champion, the man who refuses to be invisible. Going to university was a fresh start for me, an escape from the suffocating shadow of being the other son. My sports achievements had earned me a spot. Not my grades, not my parents' money, just my own blood, sweat, and persistence. Meanwhile, Tim waltzed into a prestigious school with our parents footing the bill, proud to invest in their golden boy's future. I left home without a backward glance, barely returning even during holidays. Mom would call occasionally, but I always found an excuse: practice, training, a project, anything to avoid going back to that house where I felt like an outsider. At university, I found something, or rather, someone, who changed everything. Liala. The moment I met her, it was like the world clicked into place. She was warm, intelligent, and she saw me in a way no one else ever had. We bonded over late-night talks, shared dreams, and the quiet understanding that comes from being seen for who you truly are. It wasn't long before we were inseparable. Liala was the first person to believe in me, not because of what I'd achieved, but because of who I was. When she told me she wanted to marry me, I couldn't believe it. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had a future worth looking forward to, a family of my own that I could build with someone who truly cared about me. Meeting her parents only solidified that feeling. They were warm, welcoming, and seemed to genuinely like me. But when the topic of introducing her to my family came up, I froze. I didn't want Liala to meet them. How could I explain the coldness, the distance, the way my parents had always made me feel like I wasn't enough? I didn't want her to see that part of my life, the part that had shaped so much of my self-doubt. But Liala was insistent, gently pushing me to bridge the gap. She believed in family, in connections, in giving people a chance. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Bringing her home felt like walking into enemy territory. The house looked the same, but it didn't feel like home. It never had. My parents were polite when they met Liala, their smiles practiced and formal. Timothy, of course, stole the spotlight effortlessly. He charmed her with his wit and intelligence, and I couldn't help but feel a pang of resentment. The dinner was tense for me. I watched as my parents showered Timothy with their usual attention, asking about his studies, his plans, his life. When it came to me, their questions were perfunctory, almost as if they were asking out of obligation. Thanksgiving was supposed to be just another chore. When Mom called and insisted I come home, I agreed out of some lingering sense of obligation. I wasn't excited about it, but I didn't want to deal with her nagging. Besides, I figured I could get through one awkward dinner and be done with it. When I arrived, the house felt as it always did, like a place I didn't belong. My parents were already at the dinner table, sipping wine and looking far too cheerful. Mom was practically glowing when she announced, "Timothy's bringing his fiancée tonight." Fiancée? That threw me for a loop. I hadn't even known Timothy was dating anyone seriously. But then again, why would I? I'd stopped caring about his life years ago. Still, I sat there, trying to muster some interest, some shred of politeness. And then they walked in. The moment I saw her, my heart stopped. Liala. She was on Timothy's arm, her smile radiant as she flashed a diamond ring to my parents. They gasped with delight, rushing to embrace her like she was some long-lost daughter. I couldn't breathe. My world narrowed to that one horrifying moment, the sound of their laughter echoing in my ears as if it were mocking me. Liala turned to look at me, and her smile faltered. Her eyes met mine, and for a split second, I thought I saw regret, or maybe it was guilt. Whatever it wasn't enough. I sat there in stunned silence, my mind racing but unable to form a single coherent thought. Mom, oblivious as always, turned to me with a smile and said, "Say something, Elliot. Aren't you happy for them?" Happy? That word felt like poison. It churned in my stomach, mixing with the humiliation and rage boiling inside me. I clenched my fists under the table, my nails digging into my palms. All I could say, because it was all I felt in that moment, was, "I hope you all die in a house fire." The words came out cold and sharp, cutting through the room like a blade. The smiles vanished. My parents stared at me, stunned. Leala's face turned pale. Timothy just stood there, his arms still around her, as if he didn't quite understand what had just happened. I didn't wait for their responses. I pushed back my chair, the screech of wood against the floor ringing in the silence, and walked out the door. As I drove away, my hands shook on the steering wheel. I couldn't tell if I was angrier at Leala for betraying me, Timothy for taking what little happiness I'd found, or myself for ever believing I deserved better. Thanksgiving was ruined, but so was everything else. My family, my past, my future. It all felt like it had crumbled in an instant. And for the first time, I didn't care if I ever saw any of them again. When I left that house on Thanksgiving, I knew I was done. Done with the betrayal, the lies, and the constant reminders that I never mattered to them. The people who were supposed to love and support me had crossed the final line, and there was no coming back from it. My parents, who knew Layla was my girlfriend, were overjoyed to welcome her as Timothy's fiancée. The woman I had loved, the one I'd thought wanted a future with me, had cheated on me with my own brother, and not just cheated, but flaunted it in front of me. If that wasn't a loud and clear message that I didn't belong in their lives, I didn't know what was. But you know what? They deserved each other. My brother, who always had to take what was mine, and Layla, who betrayed me so effortlessly. Let them have their perfect little life together. I didn't want any part of it. I blocked all four of them, my parents, Timothy, and Layla, from my phone that same night. I erased their numbers, deleted every old message, and removed every trace of them from my life. At university, I made it clear. I wouldn't acknowledge Layla. She tried a couple of times, calling my name, trying to catch up to me. I didn't give her the satisfaction of a glance. She had made her choice, and I wanted nothing to do with her. For a while, I thought about teaching Timothy a lesson, showing him that he couldn't always take what he wanted and get away with it. But every time I thought about it, I saw the bigger picture. He wasn't worth it. They weren't worth it. No way was I going to risk my future or my freedom just to settle a score with someone as petty as him. Some family members reached out after a while, wondering why I wasn't showing up at holidays or other events. I told them the truth. I don't belong there. Simple, direct, and final. Most of them didn't press me further. Maybe they knew. Maybe they didn't. I didn't care enough to explain. Cutting them all out of my life was like taking a deep breath after being underwater for too long. The weight lifted. Life wasn't perfect, but it was better, cleaner, quieter. I focused on my training, my studies, and the people who truly cared about me. Sometimes, cutting out toxic people isn't just a choice, it's survival. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could finally live. After that chapter of my life closed, I decided I was done with bonds, love, and all the mess that came with them. Trust was a fragile thing, and I wasn't going to let anyone shatter it again. So, I threw myself into what I could control. My studies, my training, and my future. Sports were still my passion, but I knew early on I wasn't going to be the next big name in boxing or judo. And that was okay. The discipline I'd learned through years of training pushed me through university and into a solid career. When I landed a job at a major automobile manufacturer, I felt like I'd found my place. The work was challenging but rewarding. It gave me purpose, structure, and something to focus on beyond the ghosts of my past. My life settled into a rhythm, one that I controlled. I'd wake up early, hit the gym, and push my body to its limits. Then it was off to the office, where I threw myself into my work, always striving to be better than I was yesterday. Evenings were my time to unwind. Most nights, I'd head to the club, grab a cold beer, and watch whatever boxing match was on TV. Seeing fighters in the ring always reignited that spark in me, reminding me of who I was and what I loved. Home was quiet, and I liked it that way. No drama, no distractions, just me and my space. I'd fall asleep, wake up, and do it all over again. Some people might call that boring, but to me, it was peace. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control of my life, unburdened by anyone else's expectations or betrayals. Sure, there were moments when I'd see a couple holding hands or hear a coworker talk about their family, and a flicker of something, regret, maybe, would creep in, but I'd quickly push it aside. Love had been nothing but a weapon in my life, wielded to hurt and manipulate. I didn't need it. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Every step, every decision, every routine was on my terms. And for now, that was enough. It started with a call. My mother called me. It felt like a ghost from a past I'd long buried. Against my better judgment, I answered. Her voice was the same, calm but with that unmistakable edge of authority she always used when she wanted something. "Elliot, you need to come home. There's an emergency. You have to come." The words hit me like a stone wall. How had she even gotten my number? I didn't ask. I didn't care. I just hung up without a word. Whatever emergency they had going on, it wasn't my problem anymore. But then, a few minutes later, my phone rang again. This time, it was Coach Joe. Joe was the only person who'd ever felt like family to me, the only one who'd seen me for who I was and stood by me. I couldn't ignore his call. When I answered, his tone was softer than usual, almost pleading. "Elliot, I know this isn't what you want to hear, but I need you to come home. It's important." I knew right away my parents had put him up to this. They must have known he was the only person I'd even consider listening to. A part of me wanted to tell him no, to hang up and block his number too. But it was Joe, the man who'd been there for every match, every win, every loss. "Fine," I said, my voice clipped. The drive home felt like stepping back into a life I'd spent years trying to escape. Memories flooded my mind. Sitting in the back seat as a kid, my parents barely acknowledging me while they praised Timothy for some meaningless achievement. Every mile felt heavier, as if the closer I got to that house, the more I could feel the weight of their indifference, their betrayal. I didn't know what kind of emergency was waiting for me, but I knew one thing for sure. Whatever it wasn't for me. I wasn't coming back for them. I was coming back because Joe asked me to. For him, and only him. Walking into that house felt like stepping onto a stage where everyone was reading from a bad script. My dad opened the door, and there he was, all smiles, trying to act like we were just one big happy family. My mother was sitting at the kitchen table, her hands clasped like she was praying. The whole thing reeked of desperation. I didn't bother with pleasantries. "Cut the fake drama and get to the point," I said, crossing my arms. They exchanged a glance, the kind that said they were gearing up for something big. My mother spoke first, her voice trembling. "Elliot, it's Timothy. He has cancer." The words hung in the air, but they didn't hit me the way they probably hoped they would. I just stood there, unmoved. My father jumped in, trying to close the deal. "We need your help. He needs a bone marrow transplant, and you're the only match." I raised an eyebrow. "Why not you? Or Mom?" My mother's face crumpled, and she said softly, "We're not a match. Timothy has a rare blood type. Yours." I let that sink in for a moment, then pushed my chair back and stood. "Your problem," I said flatly. "You deal with it. I'm out." I turned and walked out of that house without looking back, leaving them sitting there in their manufactured little moment of grief. As far as I was concerned, their golden boy could have their golden sympathy. I wasn't part of their world anymore, and I wasn't about to let them drag me back in. Not even for this. As I reached the door, I felt my father's hand grab my arm. I turned to see him on his knees, tears streaming down his face. "Elliot, please," he begged, his voice cracking. "He's your brother. We need you." For a split second, I froze. Not because of his words, but because I'd never seen him like this, desperate, vulnerable. It might have made a difference once, but not now. I pulled my arm free and stepped toward the door. Then my mother's voice rang out, sharp and venomous. "You're so selfish. After everything, you're just going to walk away? You've always been like this, Elliot. Always thinking only about yourself." I stopped in my tracks, her words hitting me not because they hurt, but because they were so absurd. I turned back slowly, locking eyes with her, and I saw it. The same cold judgment she'd always reserved for me. But this time, I wasn't a kid anymore. This time, I had something to say. "All my life," I began, my voice steady but laced with years of pain, "you two treated me like shit. Tell me, Mom, how many championships have I won? Can you even name one? Tell me, who filled out my university admission papers? Oh, that's right, it was me. Who paid for my studies? Me again. And tell me, how many times did you even think about me after you were done throwing your money and praise at Timothy?" I stepped closer, my eyes boring into hers. "Even today, when you finally picked up the phone to call me, it wasn't for me. It was for him. Your only son, right? Not for the one you gave birth to and left to rot. Well, here I am, Mom, your rotten son, standing right in front of you." She stared at me, speechless, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to form a response but couldn't find the words. "You made me this way," I said, my voice rising. "You made me someone who doesn't care, someone who doesn't need you, someone who doesn't owe you a damn thing. So deal with it." I turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me. For the first time in years, I felt free. Not because I was leaving, but because I'd finally said what needed to be said. They wanted me to save Timothy, but they never realized I wasn't their son anymore. Not really. They killed that bond a long time ago. That evening, the phone rang again. This time, it was Joe. His voice was somber, heavy with the weight of what he had to say. "Elliot," he began, pausing like he wasn't sure how to tell me, "Timothy's gone. He passed away earlier today." I sat there in silence, staring at the wall. The words didn't hit me like they might have if we'd been close, or if I'd felt anything for him in years. Instead, it was just empty. "They were too late to call you," Joe added, his voice quieter now. I could sense he was testing the waters, seeing if I'd break. But I didn't. "Okay," I said simply and hung up. I didn't ask about Layla. I didn't need to. I could guess she wasn't there. Timothy had become useless to her the moment he couldn't offer her the life she wanted. And in some twisted way, that didn't surprise me. It was only weeks later that an old university friend reached out, sharing news I hadn't expected. Layla was dead. A car crash. She'd been partying, high on narcotics, when it happened. The girl who once spoke about a future together, who betrayed me without a second thought, had destroyed herself. Life has a way of tying up its loose ends, I guess. My parents, on the other hand, seemed determined to untangle theirs. They started calling me every week. I didn't answer. They'd already used up their second, third, and fourth chances years ago. Some extended family reached out too, with all the usual lines. "They're trying to make it up to you, or they've changed." I wasn't buying it. I told them exactly what I thought. The only reason they're calling is because I'm all they have left. If Timothy were alive, I wouldn't even exist in their world. So spare me the guilt trip. Joe, ever the steady presence in my life, suggested I start therapy. At first, I brushed him off, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized he might be right. I'd spent so many years building walls that I didn't know how to tear them down, even for myself. So, I started therapy. Slowly, hesitantly. It's not easy, facing everything you've tried to bury. But I'm trying. For the first time in a long time, I'm trying to mend the broken pieces of my emotional life. I don't know where this path will lead, but for now, I'm walking it. And for the first time in years, I feel like maybe, just maybe, it will turn out fine. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
From the start, I knew my wife was cheating. Here's how I planned the ultimate revenge. I'm torn about whether I can bring myself to cause the pain I know I'm about to inflict on an innocent party who doesn't deserve what's about to happen in the next half hour or so. However, as I gaze at the large, meticulously framed photograph of me and Dave on our wedding day, hanging above the mantel, my tearless eyes reflect the emotional toll of my mostly happy-year marriage. Those tears were shed during the internal debate on whether to proceed with this conversation. The verdict is yes, but I'm still resisting the urge to flee. Dave is going to be devastated. Seated beside me on the sofa, John gives my hand a reassuring squeeze, boosting my courage. I glance sideways at him and smile in gratitude. Over the months of our affair, I've gradually fallen in love with him, and I'm aware that every bit of love I've given him has been taken directly from Dave. The moment it felt like cheating to make love to my husband marked the beginning of preparations for this meeting. I'm not looking forward to it, but I anticipate relief afterward. I'm going to hurt Dave profoundly, unavoidable as it may be, yet once it's over, I can end the charade, pretending that I'm as deeply in love with Dave as he clearly is with me, pretending to go out with my girlfriends, on work trips, clothes shopping, all the while meeting up with John. It's incredibly stressful and a significant factor in the worry lines increasingly visible on my face each morning. Yes, I look forward to the release. I glance at the bookcase, ensuring the baseball bat I discreetly placed there earlier is still in position. Dave's stance on fidelity is well known to me. Since the kids left home, he's been reading short stories about cheating wives facing consequences. Some of these stories surprised me with the husband's fierce reactions, making the wives pay dearly for their transgressions. When I questioned him, he simply mentioned colleagues who experienced upheavals in the no-fault family court system after sharing similar stories. Update: Dave by nature isn't a violent man, but when confronted by the person stealing his happiness and future, he might make an exception. He surpasses John in size, fitness, and strength and is less sensitive, holding a prominent position in a biomedical company. Dave contrasts sharply with John, an artist. Despite any provocation, I know Dave won't physically damage me, allowing me to keep him at bay so John can escape. I hear Dave's car in the driveway, and my stomach churns. Heart pounding, I swallow, needing to steel myself. Deep breath. I wonder about his thoughts on the unfamiliar car John's car. I sense that Dave must have read a similar scenario in a cheating story, the first one I ever read. My heart rate increases. I must stay calm. Dave walks in, eyeing John with curiosity. I stay seated, avoiding kissing Dave in front of John. Dave notices my omission and approaches with an outstretched hand. He introduces himself as Dave, and John hesitates before a brief handshake. Dave discreetly rubs his hand on his pants, a gesture I recognize after so many years. John retreats to the couch. Dave grabs a beer, sits opposite us, takes a pull, placing the can on the coffee table alongside our glasses. The tension makes my nerves feel on the verge of snapping, like a branch pushed beyond its limit. I can't meet Dave's questioning gaze. Instead, my eyes flit lower to his casual attire. When did he start coming home dressed so casually? I shake off inane questions about clothing. Now is the moment I've been dreading, where I shatter the soul of an outstanding community member, terrific father, provider, and nearly perfect husband, the first love of my life. But not the last. I admit that we need to talk to Dave. He responds with a neutral, unreadable expression. As expected, in pressure situations, he remains coldly analytical, thinking on his feet better than I do. Despite preparing for every angle, my nerves betray me. I say to Dave that I want him to know he's done absolutely nothing wrong. My voice is shaky as I clear my throat, still unable to meet his eyes. Throughout all the years we've been together, my friends have been envious of our marriage. It should be acknowledged that Dave has been an exceptional husband. I laugh, but Dave doesn't reciprocate with a smile. Attempting to cushion the forthcoming blow, I admit my apprehension about discussing this with some friends, fearing they may not forgive me for causing Dave pain. Even as I focus my gaze over his shoulder, I notice no hint of a smile or softening in Dave's features. His lips move, but he resembles a statue. He questions if I'm going to hurt him, and the words are simple yet compelling, drawing my gaze to his. I finally meet his eyes, but his stare is firm and unyielding, as if studying something on a microscope slide, and it breaks the spell, making me look away, unnerved. I express my regret to Dave, explaining that I have fallen out of love with him and fallen in love with John. I want to hurt him as little as possible, but I need a divorce so John and I can be together. Pausing at this juncture, now that the words are spoken, I try to discern any turmoil behind his mask. Expecting to see something throbbing at his temple, wet eyes, tightly drawn lips, his fist clenching, yet there's nothing. His reaction, or rather his lack of it, terrifies me. I can't help but glance at the baseball bat. The silence between us is agonizing, unbearable. I have to fill it. My carefully prepared speech is a thing of the past. I explain that I didn't want to hurt him until I absolutely had to. I hope he sees that John and I have been incredibly careful, not wanting him to find out until it was absolutely necessary, which is now. That meant limiting our time together. My concern for you, for your feelings, significantly restricted the occasions John and I could be together. Be together, avoiding me, you mean? I can't respond. I can't meet his gaze. I have no more lies left in me. I've exhausted them all. I can't lie to this man, not anymore. I respect him too much, but I had hoped he wouldn't ask, wouldn't be so direct. His words make it all seem sordid. My lack of response is all the confirmation Dave needs. There doesn't seem to be anything left to say or any point in apologizing again. I'm willing to hurt Dave. I know it. He knows it. Update. The room's atmosphere is dreadful, and I yearn to escape. The tension is nearly unbearable, and my nerves are so tightly strung that my skin prickles uncomfortably. While Dave isn't outwardly screaming in pain, I know him well enough to sense the internal turmoil. Anxiously, I wonder which of my anticipated responses from him will unfold. Regardless, I know it will be terrible. Something must break through for me to start my life with John. For what feels like an eternity, Dave stares at me until he acknowledges, "Okay, Chelsea." My response is automatic and slips out before I can edit it. I question him, asking what he means by okay. I assume he wants a divorce so he can marry the other person. His tone remains patient, his expression bland and neutral. I sit back, too stunned to speak. This isn't one of the expected reactions. Unexpected, out of left field, like a kicky feel insulted. There are no questions, accusations, raised voices, red face, or tears. After 28 years together, my husband isn't going to spend even 5 minutes questioning me. After months of agonizing over my affair with John and sleepless nights dreading this moment, I've been discarded in under minutes, all without apparent emotion. I realize I need to say something, but I must be careful. I consider how to break through Dave's reserve without losing Joan a fine line. I bring up the fact that, after all our years together, he is willing to just walk away. Dave questions why I wouldn't agree to part ways, asserting that I've already emotionally left him. He wonders about the point of fighting and suggests preserving our fond memories by going separate ways. It's an answer, though not the one I was hoping for. Before I can pose another question, Dave continues, anticipating that I have papers for him to sign. Indeed, I have a signed and notarized divorce petition, but it's in John's car. We didn't anticipate progressing beyond the anticipated yelling, screaming, and possible tears tonight, let alone Dave examining or signing any papers. Before I can rise to retrieve the documents, John stands and exits. I observe him, sensing the tension affecting him as well. In the uncomfortable silence following his departure, I express my apologies to Dave, regretful for causing him pain. Dave stands up, and my eyes involuntarily glance at the bat. He dismisses my apologies, asserting that if I were truly sorry, I wouldn't have done it in the first place. He strides into the kitchen for another beer, effectively ending the conversation. Upon his return, John is back with the manila envelope, holding it at waist height. Dave takes 2 quick steps toward him. My heart goes out to John as he steps backwards, tripping over his feet, hitting the edge of the couch, and landing with a soft thud. Now holding the envelope, Dave glances at me, red-faced, realizing he isn't covering himself in glory. I try to convey with my eyes that I don't care, that I love him. Turning to Dave, who watches me with an impersonal expression, I still can't read his thoughts, and I'm not entirely sure he won't attack John. I inform Dave that Mary is aware of our presence, and if she doesn't hear from us by 8, I instructed her to call the police. I add that if he wants someone to blame, he should blame me instead of directing any anger toward John. In response, Dave expresses that he does blame me, highlighting that I made numerous promises to him all those years agonied John. He assures me that he doesn't want John to suffer any more than he's already going to. I question Dave about why John would suffer and what he means by that. Dave gives me a look a kinder and more patient version, the kind he uses when explaining something I may not fully understand. He elaborates on the idea that being a woman of 50, I am past the age of giving John children, making him go childless, a genetic backwater. Dave expresses his belief that there is no worse punishment for a man than never experiencing the joy of witnessing a child's first steps or hearing them say dada for the first time. He goes on to describe how John will miss out on the typical experiences of teaching a child to catch a ball, ride a bike, helping with homework, and teaching them to drive. Dave emphasizes that John will never be a hero to his daughter or a role model for his son. He speculates that our kids will likely want nothing to do with John once they discover what the two of us did. His words cause my blood to turn to ice, and I shiver, realizing I haven't considered the impact on the kids amidst the turmoil of my affair and the end of my marriage. I attempt to reassure Dave, telling him he doesn't have to tell them. Dave questions if I want him to lie to the kids as I lied to him. I hang my head, but he continues, emphasizing that John will marry someone he can never fully trust. He describes how John will be with someone capable of hurting him while professing love, someone skilled at hiding abhorrent behavior with acting skills. Dave prompts me to think about how John will feel the first time I inform him that I'm working late, going out with friends, or using the same myriad excuses I used with Dave to spend time with him. Shifting focus to me, Dave speculates about the future when my looks start to fade in another 5 years, while John remains a trim-looking year-old. He questions whether John will hesitate to leave me, having seen all my perceived flaws. Dave mentions aspects like my crankiness due to PMT, my loud snoring in deep sleep, and other habits that John will soon discover. Offended, I leap to my feet, ready to retaliate, claiming that I'm not the only one who snores and pointing out my ability to color coordinate. I start to list Dave's faults, but a gasp from John stops me. His expression shows that Dave's points are resonating. I realize I need to get John out of here. Dave shrugs while I collapse back onto the couch, shocked and filled with anger and offense. Is this truly what he thinks of me? Has he harbored these thoughts throughout all these years? Update, I have so much I want to say. After months of doing my utmost to keep my affair secret to protect Dave, I now have an overwhelming desire to make him pay for not caring, for discarding me so easily. But the words won't come fail me as I watch Dave take a swig of his beer before tearing open the envelope. I look down at my hands, avoiding John's gaze, and can only hope he's not looking at me either. Dave mutters about half the value of the house. Looking up at me, he disputes the idea, asserting that it was his before he even met me. Dave suggests I might get away with half the bank account, but there may not be as much in there as I think. He acknowledges the likelihood of splitting the difference in our retirement accounts at the date of our separation, but mentions that I won't receive anything until he retires in 17 years. As he reads the rest of the document, he falls silent. I contemplate whether John's love for me can overcome the fact that we won't have the financial stability we thought we'd have, as I had assured him. Dave's words echo in my mind about the difference between an artist and a pizza, using John as a living example. What's the difference between an artist and a pizza? A pizza can feed a family. The silence drags on, feeling interminable. Finally, Dave looks up and comments that everything seems pretty reasonable, except for the house, anticipating that my lawyer will charge me thousands to fight that. He then shifts the focus to the immediate future, wondering what we do now. He suggests I get a lawyer, and he contemplates packing a few things, but I interject, expressing my desire for him to leave right away. Dave considers alternatives, suggesting he could drop my belongings off at John's place next weekend. He plans to change the locks in 2 days, making it impractical for me to return. He mentions that if I miss anything, I can email him. Dave declares that I can have all the pictures off the walls, excluding the ones of the kids. As we divide those, he emphasizes his desire for no reminders of me, except for the photo of us on the cruise last year, which I can't have. I wonder what is so special about that picture that it's the only one with me that Dave wants to keep. It was taken about 3 months after I'd started my affair with John, when Dave surprised me with a short-notice cruise in the Caribbean. I didn't love John at that stage, and still enjoyed sleeping with my husband, so the photo shows a woman smiling after much love. I have no idea why he wants just that one of us. While I'm musing on that, Dave turns directly to John and addresses him for the first time. He inquires about John's current address, initially mentioning 42 Belmont, and then correcting himself, noting that John moved a few months ago to 58 Gravilla. The revelation leaves me shocked. Dave knew about John's new address, not only that, but he's known for at least 4 months. I grapple with the realization, questioning when and how he found out. We've been so careful, and I can't fathom how I missed any signs. I replay scenes of dinners, closeness, moments, gifts, date nights, birthdays, our anniversary, mornings, nights, days, and time with our children. Yet in not one scene could I detect a change in Dave. I look at Dave as if seeing him for the first time. This is the man I have spent my entire adult life with. The man who held my hand and encouraged me while I gave birth to our children. The man who I nursed through influenza, the real one. The one where you can't lift your head off the pillow, who nursed me through morning sickness and an emergency. The man I should know as well as the back of my hand. The man I should be in tune with. Notice any change in? None. There's been none, I'm sure of it. I stare at him, marveling a stranger. My husband of 28 years is a stranger to me. I've been thinking myself so clever, so careful, not giving anything away, such a good actress. But Dave is better. So much better. He knew and hid his knowledge from me. How could he? How could he hide it so well? If he truly loves me, he shouldn't have been able to. The thought triggers heat I don't want to explore. The logic of it, had I truly loved him, would I have been able to hide it so well? But clearly I didn't hide it so well. Dave knew, had known for months. I look at him, but it's not him from the here and now, it's him from a mere 2 weeks ago. I see him undressing me, gentle, loving, cherishing. A lie he knew. I think about how hard I'd worked to respond, to hide my guilt, how careful I'd been to ensure my expression was loving and responsive. I contemplate the tears I suppressed, silently apologizing to John while reciprocating, touching, and kissing, pretending I desired to make love. The stress is present the battle against the urge to flee, to recoil, the shame when my body betrayed my heart and climaxed. I had to resist leaping from the bed immediately after, wanting to wash Dave's scent off me following the act. I lay beside him, sleepless while he slept, apologetic to both men. I've lied and betrayed both. I reflect on the days and nights where similar scenes played out, my heart pounding. Not from love or lust, but from fear of being caught, anxiety over lies, stress over my performance, and the thought of my deception, my betrayal, being exposed all for nothing. Dave had known for months. I've been scared, editing every word, conscious of every facial expression, nerves stretched to their limit, exhausted from hiding my betrayal and shielding Dave from hurt, keeping track of my lies. Sleepless, a mental wreck all for nothing. Did he love me at all, ever? How long has he been pretending? A month? 4? 15? 28 years? All those things he said to John, all those awful things, what he truly thinks of me. I look at him, and I want to cry. He's dry-eyed. It's me fighting tears, me nauseous from rage and rejection. I reach for the glass of Chardonnay, wanting to douse the flames and rinse the bitter from my mouth. It tastes sour. Dave removes the glass of wine from my hand, holding John's half-finished glass in the other. He turns and walks toward the kitchen, emphasizing the shift from ours to his kitchen. Over his shoulder, he casually instructs me to hurry, mentioning that John is already at his car. The dismissal is evident, and I turn my head to find that John has indeed left the room. He didn't wait for me, and we won't be walking out together. Update: 4 years later, closing the magazine, I realize I can't recall a single article or add probably no loss. The content is likely outdated. Checking the dates on the cover, I confirm the magazine is 3 years old. I think to myself, surely a doctor's practice as large and well patronized as this one can afford current magazines. As I return it to the stack and select another, I continue my next round of board flicking, waiting for my name to be called. When I hear Mrs. Smith, I don't react immediately. It takes a repetition for me to startle, feeling a bit foolish. Even after 4 years, I'm not used to being called Mrs. Smith instead of Mrs. Brown. I rise, heft my bag onto my shoulder, and head down the corridor to my doctor's room. The doctor greets me with, "Hello, Mrs. Smith. What can I do for you today?" I explain that I've come to have my implant replaced after 5 years. He acknowledges this, noting it's in my appointment notes, and suggests that I talk to my husband about sharing the responsibility and considering a vasectomy. He smiles, and I return the smile, responding with, "Maybe next time." I keep my face friendly and neutral, but inside I feel smug. My arguments with John about him having a vasectomy have been a battle of wills for months. Why should I continue to chemically poison my body when he can just undergo a simple procedure? It's not even an operation done in a hospital. The good doctor here could perform it. Unlike the non-chemical option for me, which would be to have my tubes tied, something I've pointed out to John more than once. During our last argument over the issue, I remembered Head said Head had the mumps as a child. I asked him to get his sperm tested, thinking I could still have a win in our standoff and go off birth control if the test came up with John having a low sperm count. The stubborn guy refused to get tested. But also stubborn, so while still churning over his harsh words, I secretly salvaged some of his sperm and sent it off for testing. Oh yes, I stored it correctly, truly. Turns out John doesn't just have a low sperm count, he's sterile. No sperm in his semen at all. Initially flush with victory, I intended to confront him with the results, but then common sense prevailed. I wanted a happy husband again, not a sparring partner. I wanted lovemaking, not merely the release of attraction. Somewhere, I remembered the inconvenience of monthly bleeds. I like not having to deal with menstruation, so a replacement implant it is. After all, it won't be forever. Dr. Jones is saying something and I totally miss it. I apologize and ask him to repeat. He suggests swapping my implant for the new type of contraceptive implant, explaining that it is rather fantastic. Not only does it offer contraception, but it also records my pulse at regular intervals during the day and comes with a variety of other recording tools we use for diagnostic purposes. So if you come in feeling unwell, all you have to do is pause by one of our scanners, and it downloads information, and we can see what's been happening with you internally since your last visit. Real space-age stuff. Wow, I laugh. It sounds like something off Star Trek. What about side effects? I'm not going to end up the size of a barn, am I? Or grow whiskers or something. And is it like Implanon in that most women stop bleeding altogether? No, nothing like that. Less disruptive than Implanon, but with all its benefits, such as stopping, or at least lessening the heaviness of blood flow. Okay, sounds good. Dr. Jones turns to his monitor and clicks on one of the icons on his home screen. Oh, he murmurs, rubbing his neck. What the? I look at him, then the screen, wondering at his confused tone. How long did you say you've had your implant in? He asks, turning toward me. 5 years, how is that possible? Are you certain? It appears you already have a Vanguardian implant. All your medical information is downloaded. Confused, I ask, what? The doctor explains that I must have been in within the last months, since that's how long they've been approved and available. However, I protest, stating that I haven't been to a doctor in 2 years or more. He turns back to the screen, and even in profile I can see he's gone pale. He mentions that there's information going back 4 years and questions the presence of WAV files, which are audio files. He speculates that there must be a glitch, suggesting that someone else's Vanguardian might have been accidentally linked to my patient card. However, the timeline doesn't add up, and he's perplexed by the inclusion of a Google map with a flag showing the clinic. To resolve the mix-up, the doctor suggests examining my implant. My head is spinning as I move to the examination bench and lay down. I turn my head away, as I'm a little squeamish about needles and the like. It's definitely a Vanguardian, he says, and I can hear the confusion in his voice. It's the same as the ones we implant, except for being a smidge longer and wider. I swivel my head and look at the doctor, comparing my implant with an image on the screen. My eyes are drawn to the top of the page Vanguardian. Seeing it written jogs a memory. I know that name. That was someone's pseudonym on the amateur writing site where Dave was reading about cheating wives. A coincidence? The rest of my appointment passes in a blur. We'll sort this out, Mrs. Smith. There has to be some sort of cross signal or something in your old implant. Or maybe you were part of some test group or something. I'll get our tech guys onto Vanguardian, and we'll be in touch. I nod and walk back to the reception area. I pay my bill and head to my car. With my hands on the wheel, snatches of conversations from the past spill into my already overloaded head. Update. There's a clause in my contract stating they own all my research and inventions, even if I work on something at home during my own time. I can't patent it for at least 12 months after resigning. Dave's favorite part of his work was research, and innovation it was his forte. In my mind's eye, I see Dave seated on the couch with me and John. I envision his faded jeans and casual polo shirt. I recall the shock of our meager savings when dividing assets and his insistence on keeping the framed photo from the Caribbean cruise, taken 3 months into my affair with John. Stunned, my hands dropped to my lap. I had the implant inserted weeks before that cruise, at Dave's suggestion to avoid inconvenient monthly disruptions during our vacation. I felt touched to have such a considerate husband. Looking back at the clinic, it's a different one from my previous choice. I changed doctors and clinics after separating from Dave because our old doctor shared with Dave was a friend of his father and the one who inspired Dave to enter medical research. Continuing with Dr. Black would have been awkward. Dave knew about John. He must have known from the start. Somehow, he convinced Dr. Black to implant a device he developed, a Vanguardian. Mine had a GPS locator and the ability to record voice files. It seems illegal. I don't recall consenting, but I signed something. Regardless, I should sue Dr. Black. I didn't know what I was signing. Hez retired and living in Brazil apparently. His much younger wife is from there. Can he be extradited from Brazil, where German war criminals fled during World War II due to no extradition treaty? Why develop an implant with GPS and recording abilities? Surely not just to track me. My mind mulls it over and then it hits. The military. Yes, military. Something like that would be useful for them. I know Dave was involved in developing something for diabetic soldiers that regulated their sugar without daily injections or medication. So a GPS locator and recorder aren't much of a leap. My mind swirls with possibilities. Around the time of our cruise, or shortly after, Dave must have quit his job. No wonder our savings were low. He had us living off it. I never checked. I used my credit card and Dave handled bills. Was the cruise photo a memento of his resignation? Dave organized the framing himself. Could it have been the scanner for the implant? Surely not. Deep inside, I know that's exactly what it was. That's why he suggested hanging it in the hall by the coat rack, and why he opposed me having it. He knew I might reframe it or give it to the kids who could have discovered its true purpose. The enormity of how I've been deceived leaves me stunned. It all appears so unbelievable, like something from a Jason Bourne or James Bond movie. Yet my gut insists it's true, all of it. It feels as though there's a vice tightening around my chest, making it hard to breathe. No wonder he didn't seek revenge in the divorce. He had already done it, at least financially, and I can't do anything about it. Dr. Black is likely beyond reach, and Dave, being Dave, probably secured my signature on a consent form. To make matters worse, it's been almost 4 years since Dave and I finalized our divorce. While I'll receive a portion of his retirement funds, I suspect the millions he earns from Vanguardian are funneled through corporations, and I won't see a penny. I touch my arm where the new implant lies. I can't even confide in John. Things are already shaky at home without me revealing how thoroughly my ex-husband deceived me. Now Dave lives in the Algarve, and the kids rave about his beachfront villa, though we rarely talk. In a daze, I pull into the driveway of the small, run-down cottage I share with John. I can't recall the trip home. I hope I didn't run any red lights. The last thing I need, on top of today's revelations, is a traffic infringement notice. On autopilot, I unlock the door and enter the lounge. John is on the couch. Chelsea, we have to talk. Only then do I notice Hez holding hands with a girl who looks no older than 30 but is undeniably pregnant. She doesn't have much time left. 2 glasses of Chardonnay sit on the table in front of them.